It's barely a couple of weeks ago since the media and the elite celebrated 100 days of the Modi government in power. I won't speak about the media because at this point, the media are an embarrassment not only to themselves, but to Mr. Modi's public relations officers who must be feeling insecure about their jobs. So since the media are doing so much better, the sycophantic projection, that PR firm which he had hired, I don't think they have much of I don't think their contract need be renewed. The first 100 days, so we had that tamasha over the first 100 days. I asked myself this question, whether it's Mr. Modi or whether it's Mr. Dr. Manmohan Singh or whoever, what happens in those 100 days typically in rural India? What are the typical 100 days? And it's regardless of which one of these different people have been there in the last 20 years. What happens in those 100 days typically in rural India? Well, this is what happens, and all the data is official. In 100 days, 4,600 farmers commit suicide in rural India. 46,000 to 69,000 attempt it. The police say the attempt ratios are 10 to 12 for one successful suicide. That's the police figure. NGOs like Sneha, which work with suicide victims, say that's nonsense. It's 15 times. The ratio is 15 to 1. 15 attempts to one successful suicide. So, 46,000, you choose the police. 69,000, you choose the independent assessments. So in 100 days, 4,600 farmers will commit suicide. 46 to 69,000 will attempt it. 200,000 will cease to be farmers. The country is losing full status, full-time farmers at the rate of 2,000 a day for the last 20 years. By full-time farmer, I mean main worker cultivator as defined in the census of India, which is you ought to have done farming for 180 days in a year, not less than that. Less than that, you're a marginal farmer. If you're working 6 months or more in a year on that thing, obviously your main income is from that occupation. I'm just saying this because I used to think that why did they have 180 days? Why did the Babus decide on this figure? And I sort of concluded that it's because Babus work about 180 days in a year. So, but really the figure comes from 6 months shows that you are dependent, mainly dependent on this. So that person is called a main worker cultivator. The population of main worker cultivators has fallen and fallen dramatically. Till 91, it was rising. Till 1991, it was rising. Meaning people with land, it was rising. Between 91 census and 2001 census, the number of full-time farmers fell by 7.2 million. Between 2001 census and 2011 census, the number of farmers declined by 7.7 million. That's a total of 15 million decline in 20 years. You do the math. We're talking, in the last 10 years, we're talking about 2,038 every day. Now, which section is rising? This is in a time of rapidly declining rural population growth rates. The fall in rural population's growth rate is much higher than the fall in the urban population's growth rate. Okay? Especially if you're comparing it to the age states. Though the family size is still much bigger. So 4,600 suicides, 46,000 to 69,000 attempts, all in 100 days. 200,000 farmers will cease to be full-time farmers. Thousands will have left the countryside. Tens of thousands will have left the countryside in 100 days, headed for urban areas in search of jobs that are not there. In the capital city of Delhi alone, there are estimates of between 100,000 and 200,000, 1 lakh and 2 lakh adolescent girls from Jharkhand working as full-time maids, domestic maids on 24-hour call in the houses of the better off of Delhi. Jharkhand's a very small place. I mean, it's a small population. It does not have a big population. Okay? It took about 20-odd million out of Bihar. That's about all. Between 1 lakh and 2 lakh adolescent girls working. Yeah. Remember the principle that the tender age and youth of childhood will not be subjected to exploitation and abandonment. Did the Constitution's framers ever foresee how seriously those principles would be violated and despicably violated? In the 100 days, a few thousand children will die of malnourishment and hunger-related diseases in your country. In 100 days, thousands more children will enter grade 3 and grade 4 malnourishment, which are stages of malnourishment from which it's very hard to stage a comeback. From grade 4 malnourishment, there are no comebacks. You can live, but you'll be a vegetable. From grade 4 malnourishment, your cranial capacities, everything are severely damaged. All the data that I give you is official. One more piece of official. In the 100 days, and this is based on your latest budget, in the same 100 days that all these astonishing things will happen in rural India, the government of India alone writes off in the budget 1,45,753 crores in concessions to the richest 1% or 2% of the country. You can all read these figures if you are interested, and I hope damn well that you'll be interested, in the annexure to the budget called the Statement of Revenue Foregone. Last year's, the 2013 write-offs, under just 3 heads, excise duties, customs duties, and direct corporate income tax, amount to 5,32,000 crores. Every year for 6 years, the amount written off for the super rich in waivers has been close to or higher than the budget deficit. The single largest item in 2-3 years in the last 7 years, we have data only for 9 years. And do you know how much the concessions add up to? 36.5 trillion rupees. Trillion. Just try accommodating 12 zeros in your head. That is 36.5 lakh crores. Not 36.5 lakhs. 36.5 lakh crores is 36.5 trillion rupees. Do you know what you can do on 36.5 trillion rupees? You can run the Rural Employment Guarantee Scheme for only 105 years at current levels of funding. Which means that every agricultural laborer living today can have 2 lifetimes on the NREGS. It actually works out. You can run the Food Security Act, another truncated, amputated, mutilated directive principle. You can run that for 31 years. Just on this year's budget, 5,32,000 crores, you can run the NREGS for, about 3 decades, and the Food Security Act for 5 years. For 4.5 years, if you want to be precise. So don't tell me there's no money. What you have is inequality. What you have is what the Constitution described as the operation of the economic system leading to a concentration of wealth and the means of production to the detriment of the common good.